Welcome, everyone, to the New York Times Newsroom today on Pulitzer Day. A very exciting day for everyone. Everyone is here today. We get to find out who won Pulitzers for what this year. It's been a big year for journalism. We did the Me Too. We've done reporting on investigations, on Trump's first year in the White House. We've done a lot of work as well as other publications have as well. And today we get to find out who will win Pulitzers for their work. The newsroom is vibrating, it is buzzing, and everyone's very excited. This is a big day for us. The Pulitzers were started in 1917, and they're a long tradition. They give them out for newspapers, magazines, books. It's a great award, and anyone who's lucky enough to win one, it just signifies, a big impact with their journalism. And I don't know if you can hear everyone in the background, but it gets really, really crowded, and everyone's really excited because, like I said, it's been a big year for journalism. In just a little bit, the executive editor will come up to the podium and talk to us, and we'll see what he has to say. We want to congratulate all of the winners in advance. Anyone who wins a Pulitzer, you deserved it. It's been a tough year, tough, long year, and we've worked our butts off, and now we get to celebrate that work. It's a great time. It is a rowdy Pulitzer Day here at the New York Times, and everyone's just really excited. We're just feeling it, and there's cakes, there's celebratory champagne. Everyone's just looking forward to seeing how this will unfold today. It's a great way to start the week, a great Monday here at the New York Times Newsroom. Hopefully, no tough news breaks, or else a lot of people will just have to run off. But so far, everything is very calm from here. I can see Monica Drake, who is a managing editor on a masthead. She's a wonderful woman. I see Cliff Levy, another editor on the masthead, Joel Kahn. It's just going to be a great day, and no matter what happens, we're just very excited to even, be considered because of our work. This year saw the Me Too movement. It was a big story all across the board. It was covered on so many levels. And journalism is the type of work where, a publication can cover Me Too, we can cover, and there's so many angles. A publication can cover a story, we can cover it differently. It's just a great way to bounce stuff off one another, the publications and everything. It's lovely. But right now it's very exciting. I'm looking for Ms. Bennett. Hi, this is Ms. Jessica Bennett, who's our gender editor. You can wave. She's our first gender editor. She oversaw the Overlook project. She's wonderful. There's just editors all over. I am from the Express team, and they're sitting over there. Everyone's on their feet waiting to hear from Dean Baquet. I also just want to say, hi, Mom. Hi. And nerves are high. There's children here. There's people bringing their family members so they can see what's going on. And people get excited. If another publication wins, we're excited. It just means that journalism is thriving. Journalism is still good and causing change, which is what we're here to do. This is what we want to do. It's very loud, but it's a good thing. Soon everyone will be hush quiet, and we'll just get to see who gets to win. And I just want to say, on behalf of the New York Times, to all the other publications, congratulations on anything that you might win today, just in advance, because anybody that's doing journalism work is working really hard, and we applaud that, we congratulate that. It's just a very, very busy day. It keeps getting more and more crowded. We do have people at their desk again in case news breaks. I'm just very excited to be here. Very excited to see who may win and who announces what. It should be a fun day. We're looking forward to hearing from Dean Baquet and all the editors and everyone here. But the Pulitzers are headed out in Columbia University, out in Harlem. And for the first year, this this year is the first year. It's been administrated by Dana Kennedy, who was a senior editor here at the New York Times, also a reporter, and they're announcing them there. And Dean Baquet will get the info, and he will let us know what the outcome is. And it's just, on edge. Everyone in this room has had a way of putting input in a story, if it's, a photo editor or writing a headline or, editing the story or going over a story or suggesting a new angle or everyone in this building has had some sort of role to play in any of these stories that are probably or hopefully going to win. Yeah, it's wonderful to be in the New York Times newsroom, of course, for a day like today. And everyone's pretty excited, snapping photos and and filming to show and have a great time finding out what's going on. It's a very interesting day. And if you see everyone up on the balcony, they're very excited. It gets very crowded. You don't really realize this many people work here until you see them all crowded in a newsroom like this. It's a very wonderful time to be here. The reporters I know worked really hard to get their stories out and to make their impact, to make sure that their stories, hit their mark, whatever that mark may be, because I'm sure that you don't start out knowing what that mark is. Overall, hi Express. Overall, I'm very sorry. My desk is signaling that they're very excited to see me. But overall, it's going to be a great day. Everyone's very happy here. It's a very jubilant attitude. Even though the stories that we've covered have been very serious and have had their share of, sad moments and have not necessarily been cheery stories, we are always very proud of what we do here. And it's definitely something that we're proud of. We stand here and proud of all of our colleagues and everyone who's written anything that's gone in the paper, because these guys, we are the people who fill these pages up, and it's a lot of work, and we're very proud of it. We're just here and enjoying ourselves. It signifies a moment, and the stories that win these awards mean a lot. They're usually stories that have resonated with the country and sometimes the world, the international one for sure. And this is just great. I think I see Dean down there, and I hear cheers, which is a good sign. Oh, and now everyone's quiet, and I'll hand it over to Dean Baquet.
Why are you all here?
We're apparently still waiting for the announcement.
Has it been announced?
Dean is waiting for the announcements before he tells the news.
We're waiting for the official word from Allison Mitchell.
There we go.
Okay.
They're coming in. Our editor, Allison Mitchell, is getting the official word on the winners. And she'll pass them on to Dean Baquet, and he'll announce the winners. Our publisher is down there as well. A.G. Schultzberger.
Okay. So why don't we start?
There we go.
Shall we start?
Yeah.
Okay. you all have won 3 Pulitzer Prizes this year. The New York Times staff won the Pulitzer Prize for Public Service for its coverage of sexual abuse by Harvey Weinstein, Bill O'Reilly, and other powerful men. This is the most prestigious of the Pulitzers. It's only the 6th time the Times has won it, and it's the first time in 14 years. By revealing secret settlements, persuading victims to speak, and bringing powerful men to account, we spurred a worldwide reckoning about sexual abuse that only seems to be growing. The prize is shared with the New Yorker for their own remarkable reporting on Harvey Weinstein. I'll leave it to Rebecca Corbett when she comes in to name names and elaborate in a few minutes. The New York Times staff also won the Pulitzer Prize for national reporting, along with the Washington Post, for coverage of the Trump team's connections with the Russians and its attempts to sway FBI Director James Comey. This prize honors an exciting, day-by-day competition in which 2 great newsrooms fight to cover a Washington in turmoil. It is a great moment for American journalism. Elizabeth Buemiller will come up shortly and tell you more and introduce the winners. The writer Jake Halpern and illustrator Michael Sloan won the Pulitzer Prize in editorial cartooning for an This series, which was assigned by Bruce Hedlund, won for an experimental, deeply reported comic strip in the opinion section called Welcome to the New World. For almost a year, the 2 followed 2 refugee families from Syria after they arrived in the United States on Election Day 2016 and tried to make lives in suburban New England. Every 2 weeks, Michael and Jake rendered the family's progress in graphic novel form, 8 panels that appeared online and in the Sunday Review. And James and his team will come up and talk about them shortly. Just to say a few words. News organizations usually win Pulitzers either for covering the big news story of the day or for breaking the big society-rattling enterprise. I don't recall any news organization ever winning it for both in the same year. A remarkable tribute to a newsroom at the peak of its energy and creativity. The New York Times has now won 125 Pulitzer Prizes since the first was awarded 100 years ago this year. Before I go any farther, I should note that these prizes are Arthur's last as publisher. All told, we won 61 Pulitzer Prizes in his quarter century as publisher. Not that anyone's counting, but that's twice as many as the times won under his father before him. I think it's fitting that we won the Public Service Award in Arthur's final year because it's a testament to all that he and his family, including AG, have done to protect this institution. To my mind, that is the ultimate public service. And no one can say what Arthur can say, that he left a paper far better than the one he inherited. And I would like for him to come up and say a few words.
Yeah, this is a bit daunting. So, thank you, Dean. Thank you. And congratulations to you and to all our winners on this truly, truly wonderful day. Since, as Dean has noted, this is my final Pulitzer Day as my time as publisher, I hope you'll allow me to reflect on what this occasion signifies. I joined the New York Times as a reporter in 1978. Every morning for the 40 years since then, I've jumped out of bed, excited for the day ahead. But never more so than on Pulitzer Day. An opportunity once a year to pause and to celebrate not just the winners, but all New York Times journalism. To look back on the stories we've told, the lives we've changed for the better, the history we've shaped, and, of course, to drink accordingly. It's especially powerful to receive the Public Service Award, as Dean noted, journalism's highest honor for our groundbreaking investigations into sexual harassment, stories that awakened our national conscience and spurred historic change. Exactly a century ago in 1918, the New York Times was the first paper to win the Pulitzer Prize for public service. And this is our sixth time receiving that tremendous award, more than any other newspaper. I'm also reminded that in 1992, the first year that I was publisher, Anna Quinlan won a Pulitzer for commentary, and one of her winning columns was about the men who attacked Anita Hill for telling her story. 26 years later, how stunning it is to see both how far we've come and how far we still have to go. There's a plaque on the 15th floor as you enter our Pulitzer hallway that reads, "Laurels are nice to wear, but never to rest upon." That's why on Pulitzer Day, we don't just look back. We also look forward and recommit to working even harder, to digging even deeper, to aiming even higher. That's true every Pulitzer Day, but it's especially true this year. We are living through an age in which not only independent journalism, but the very idea of truth is under siege. Polarization is cleaving our country, trust in institutions is perilously low, and our common baseline of shared facts, the foundation democracy rests upon, is eroding. But let's remember, it's not gone yet. In times like these, original, deeply reported, and fearless journalism and engaging storytelling, the work we are celebrating today, makes our country and the world more transparent, more informed, and more just. So I stand here today confident in the enduring power of the First Amendment, in the unshakable courage of our journalists, and in the strength of this remarkable institution, the New York Times. You've proven that no matter what obstacles lay in our way, we will never stop marching to the truth. When everyone else closed down foreign bureaus, we continued to send our journalists to places no one else dared go. When everyone else said stories needed to be simple and short, we insisted on quality and depth. That's not saying we've clung to the status quo. Today's Pulitzer for editorial cartooning, our first ever in that category, is evidence, for example, of how we continue to reinvent storytelling. And finally, when everyone else cut their newsrooms, we did what needed to be done so that today we have more journalists than ever in our history. And yet, as exceptional as this journey has been, and despite the challenges we face, I know that our best days lie ahead. That's not only because of my confidence in AG's leadership. It's because of my faith in all of you. Your shared commitment to the values that shape the times, excellence, integrity, independence, truth, animates this organization with a purpose larger than any one of us. That idea that we at the Times are part of something bigger reminds me of a moment early in my career when I was a reporter in our Washington bureau. A colleague told me that whenever somebody left the paper, they discovered that their last name was really of the New York Times. He was right. My name is not Arthur Sulzberger Jr. My name is Arthur Sulzberger Jr. of the New York Times. That connection is central to my identity, and I know it's central to yours. The great power of this place is that people become more than themselves when they enter this building. They become part of a great American institution. Today's winners exemplify the best of that institution. They exemplify the best of our profession and the best of our country. So to Dean, to James, to Rebecca Corbett and Elizabeth Buemiller, the winners and our finalists, and also to Mark Thompson and to Meredith Kopit-Levian and to all of our business colleagues whose hard work enables us to fulfill our shared mission. Thank you for everything you do for the Times, for our country, for our world. And let me also finally thank also the members of the Sulzberger family in their unflagging commitment to this great institution and all that the New York Times does. This is especially important as we make the transition to the 5th generation of leadership. So together, we will keep chasing the truth. Congratulations, Dean. Back to you. And Dean won't say this, but just remember that part about the drinks this evening.
So we had 8 other finalists. In fact, we had a finalist in all but 9, that's right. In fact, we had a finalist in all but 4 of the journalism categories. That makes 20 finalists in the past 2 years, our highest 2-year count ever. Our finalists, and I may ask you to hold your applause till the end while I run through them. Manohla Dargis in criticism for decrying the exploitation of women in Hollywood. Manohla has been a Pulitzer finalist 4 times in the past 6 years. The staff, led by the National Desk and Video, in breaking news reporting for coverage of the shooting massacre in Las Vegas. Meredith Kohat in feature photography for her stunning photos documenting violence on the streets of Venezuela and the starvation of its children, even as the government denied it. Ivor Prickett in breaking news photography for his haunting photos of what ISIS left behind in Mosul and Raqqa. Our editorial writers, in particular Katie Kingsbury, for their series urging Congress to deny guns to domestic partners with a history of violence. Nori Onishi in feature writing for a riveting story that was part of the International Desk's series on the end of life about dying alone in Japan when cultural and familial bonds break down. And Michael Kimmelman in explanatory reporting for his knowing work on how cities are responding or not responding to climate change. for our finalists. Before I turn it over to the winners, indulge me for 1 minute, because this has been an amazing year for you all. 4 Polk Awards. Both the magazine and T won National Magazine Awards. The magazine has done us proud by stepping up its investigative journalism, and T was picked the finest magazine in its category. Dion Searcy just won the Michael Kelly Award. We were named one of the world's best designed newspapers by the Society of News Design in both the print and digital categories. And let me not forget some of the other deserving projects, in particular reporters and photographers abroad who risked their lives to reveal what powerful forces wanted to hide, like Azam Ahmed, whose reports of government spying on critics, embezzlement and rollbacks of legal protections forced a reckoning in Mexico, and Dion Searcy and Sarah Topol of the magazine, who showed how Boko Haram conscripts and abuses children. Indeed, just about every department has shared in this bounty. I've never seen anything like it. Not that long ago, we just entered reporters in contests. By contrast, the harassment and Trump teams comprise scores of journalists from across the newsroom, in fact, I think everybody here. Not just the traditional news desks, but photo, graphics, video, and the Reader Center. Our harassment coverage included work from the Daily Podcast, a Me Too newsletter, a men's poll, editorial, and op-ed pieces. And there are some wonderfully human New York Times stories embedded in this year's Pulitzers. Susan Chira, who has led many prize-winning teams, can now call herself a Pulitzer Prize winner. Rebecca Corbett, who has touched some of our finest stories for a generation, is getting recognition she has long deserved. And Mike Schmidt was a leader on 2 Pulitzer Prizes this year. I want to cite 2 people who are not up here but should be. Joe Kahn, who is a wonderful partner and a brilliant and deeply human leader and partner. And for people like me who started at the New York Times when there were only a couple of investigative reporters, would agree that the Times would not be the great investigative engine it has become without Matt Purdy. I will let Rebecca Corbett tell you more about the extraordinary newsroom-wide effort that helped to create the Me Too movement. Rebecca?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to ask the reporters who delivered the stories in the harassment entry being honored today to come up the stairs as I call your names, followed by the named editors, followed by the representatives of the departments that supported this, including the Daily, the Upshot, and Editorial. Please hold any applause until they all arrive. Jody Cantor. I know you can't help yourself. Megan Chewy, Emily Steele, Mike Schmidt, Susan Shira, Katrin Einhorn, Katie Benner, Milena Ryzik, Cara Buckley, Julie Moskin, Kim Severson, Susan Dominus, Jim Rutenberg, Rachel Abrams, Ellen Gabler, and Steve Eder. The editors who shaped those stories included Bill Brink, Pat Healy with Stephanie Goodman, Sam Sifton, and Pui Wing Tam. They would also come up. Those editors need to come forward.
Stephanie.
Okay. And as I said, representatives of the departments that helped us, including the Upshot, the Daily, and the editorial representative, please join them below. Last year, Times reporters uncovered harassment that stretched across industries, the political divide, and the income scale. The Times investigated a conservative media star and a liberal news organization, cast light inside Hollywood studios and restaurant kitchens, Silicon Valley startups, and Ford factory floors. We told the searing stories of prominent women and A-list actresses, but also little-known office assistants, aspiring comedians, food servers, and assembly line workers. Sexual harassment is an old problem, one that journalists have exposed in case after case for many years. But in attacking the issue anew with incredible tenacity, investigative tools, and institutional commitment from the very top, including Dean and Arthur, the Times revealed pervasive misconducts and identified the culture of complicity in workplaces that shielded abusers while failing to protect women. That reporting set off an extraordinary global call to action. What became a small village of reporters across the newsroom, you've seen how we've stolen from virtually every department, produced the work honored today, which included stories on Harvey Weinstein, Bill O'Reilly, Louis C.K., celebrity restaurant owner Ken Frieden, and other figures. This remarkable journalism was augmented by our colleagues in editorial and other departments and sections across the newsroom. As always, Dean and Matt Purdy had our backs. Before Jody and Megan speak, I'd like to tell you a little about their partnership. They hardly knew each other before they teamed up on this, but they share extraordinary skills in digging out information, building trust with subjects and sources, and telling a powerful tale. After a couple of months working together day after day and talking every day in meetings with them, I noticed they were even dressing alike. A lot. There was a lot of black leather. They began investigating Weinstein knowing that other journalists had failed to turn whispered complaints about the producer into publishable stories. Over months of reporting, they won over Weinstein employees and women subjected to mistreatment. They accumulated documents that led to blockbuster findings, that Weinstein had reached secret settlements with women going back to the 1970s, that he had harassed generations of his own employees, that prominent actresses had been humiliated and assaulted, and that plenty of people in Hollywood had known about it. The stories this pair delivered were the spark that set off a worldwide fire. Please welcome Jody and Megan.
This might seem strange to say, but two of the people who we're closest to in the world have no idea who Harvey Weinstein is, and they don't know a thing about our reporting on him. When our investigation began, Mira Tui Rutman weighed 12 pounds, had never eaten a bite of solid food, and had a mother who was still home on maternity leave. Violet Cantor-Lieber, at 1.5 years, was a relative giant. She was just learning to go down the slide at the playground and liked grabbing phones so much that by the end of the summer she had managed to accidentally FaceTime Ashley Judd. When these girls are much older and mature enough to understand terrible violations and humiliation and pain, we are going to sit them down and tell them the story of our investigation and our team's work, and how all of us became part of something much bigger than ourselves. We'll attempt to explain to them how one day we were working on an incredibly tough story, and then just a few days later, we started to see change happening all over the world.
Here's what we're going to tell them. The earliest part will be telling them about the women who came forward, because those women will already be inscribed in the history books. Their names synonymous not with humiliation or victimhood, but with courage, truth, and optimism that things can change. We'll tell them about Ashley Judd and Laura Madden, the first to speak out on Weinstein. One is a movie star from Tennessee. The other is a former Miramax employee who lives in Wales. But their motivations were exactly the same. As Ashley put it, women have been talking about Harvey Weinstein amongst ourselves for a long time, and it's simply beyond time to have the conversation publicly. Zelda Perkins and Ashley Mathau were all silenced by settlements. They don't know each other either, but they spoke out of a common belief that the law should not be twisted to erase abuse or muzzle women who want to help to protect other women. In 2015, Lauren O'Connor documented stories from inside the Weinstein Company that sounded exactly like the ones women were telling us from 25 years before. Gwyneth Paltrow went from being known as Harvey's special star to being known as a special voice speaking out about what really happened in those hotel rooms. Rose McGowan, Catherine Kendall, Hope Exner-Damour, Cynthia Burr, Erica Rosenbaum, all of you are so different, and yet your stories about Harvey Weinstein are so similar. Two distinguished writers named Salma Hayek and Lupita Nyong'o took the power and feeling of their memories and wrote essays for the ages that the Times was proud to publish.
What all of us on this team will remember this year was the stream of constant conversations with women in so many industries who were finally ready to share what they had faced. Tanya Exum, a Ford factory worker in Chicago, endured sexual trauma while serving in the military, only to be groped and threatened on the Ford factory floor. After she reported it, her coworkers told her that she was raping the company. Her colleague Suzette Wright spent 20 years yearning for an apology from Ford, which finally came after Susan and Catherine's story was published from Ford's CEO. Dana Min Goodman, Julia Wolof, and Rebecca Corey, three of the comedians with stories about Louis C.K., kept us laughing on the phone, even as they took the risk of describing experiences that shook their careers. After telling their stories to Katie Benner, the entrepreneurs Lindsay Mayer and Catherine Minshaw took further action, using their influence to fight for changes in the boardrooms and offices of Silicon Valley venture firms. Natalie Sabel, Jamie Seat, and Trish Nelson, employees of the Spotted Pig restaurant, all agreed to be photographed for the Times, but only if they could be together in the shot, a symbol of their courage and their solidarity. All of these women, they didn't do anything to be harassed or assaulted or humiliated. They had every right to preserve their privacy and stay silent. Instead, they took a leap of faith and told us their stories, and as a result, all of our children will benefit. Once we understood the essence of the Weinstein story, we realized that part of our job was to give the women a mountain of evidence to stand on. Documents, internal emails, settlement records, human resources reports. Our goal was to break the he said, she said cycle and show how much support there was for what the women were telling us. We didn't want to publish a first story that set off debate about what had really happened. Our aim was to publish a first story that would cause debate about why this had happened at all.
And one of the things that every child needs to learn is how to confront a bully. We want our daughters to learn from the best, Dean Baquet and Matt Purdy. Working under unimaginable pressure in an astounding news year, Dean and Matt made it clear exactly how we were to deal with Harvey Weinstein, firmly, fairly, and most importantly, on the record. Our two girls, Mira and Violet, know Rebecca Corbett as Aunt Rebecca, who has brought them toys and soft dresses since the day they were born. But one day we will explain that Aunt Rebecca is actually a titan of American journalism. She's the person who pushed and pushed for the Times to publish the original NSA investigation and kept the story alive by encouraging the reporters to just keep learning more. She was so deeply at one with the Weinstein investigation that in the final days, she stayed in the newsroom until 3 a.m. to worry about every single choice of words. And even after we broke the first story, she kept pushing us and Sue Dominus and Jim Rutenberg and Steve Eder to probe the particular moral horror of the Weinstein story. How could someone have racked up 40 years of these allegations? And instead of stopping him, why did more and more people help him? Our daughters will also know the heroic role of Rory Tolan, who deserves a medal for his own high-stakes copy editing, the kind done under legal threat in which a word out of place can trigger a lawsuit. The kind done at 2 a.m., the kind done just before the moment of publication, with Dean Baquet and Rebecca Corbett and Matt Purdy all leaning over his shoulder and reading off his screen.
In fact, as our investigation came to a climax, we really felt like everybody in this room was leaning over that computer, coming together to help confront a bully and protect the vulnerable. David McCraw, the calmest man alive in the face of legal threats. Arthur Sulzberger, who has protected so many of us from so many angry subjects over the years. Arthur, perhaps it's fitting that your time as our leader closed with a confrontation with Harvey Weinstein, a first-class threatener, an ardent believer in his own influence, and a man who proved all over again the depth and constancy of your commitment to our journalism. New York Times readers, New York Times subscribers, if you're listening out there, we are going to tell your children that you did something historic too. Millions of you came together to pay for this work, to sustain not just this investigation, but the work of this entire newsroom. We want our daughters to understand that this work is not about celebrity or even individual predators, but about our team's discovery of what now seems like an entire system of silencing women and erasing their experiences. Settlements that prevent victims from warning others, non-disclosure agreements that intimidate witnesses, a massive failure by human resources departments.
When our daughters are really mature, we'll show them Ronan Farrow's articles on Weinstein. Those will be required reading in our households and in many households beyond for their sensitive, powerful depictions of physical and emotional pain. We will tell the girls how their fathers, Ron Lieber and Vadim Retman, and Violet's older sister, Talia, who's here today, poured their own love, faith, and patience into the sacrifice of this work. Vadim, Ron, and Talia, you are the hugs that we come home to, our relief from this work, but also the reason we do it. Talia, you know that Jody and I are journalists, not activists, but the two of us and all of the reporters around the country who worked on these kind of stories did so with the hope that girls your age will know nothing but dignity and decency in the workplace and beyond.
way, we'll tell our daughters most of the story, but we're still not sure what we, or they, will say about the most important part, which is the ending. When we describe to our daughters the abuses we wrote about, will they say, "Oh yeah, that still happens all the time. It happens at my summer job. It happens on my campus"? Or will they be shocked at what seems like a bygone era and say, "Did people really think that that used to be okay back then? Mom, how could that have been allowed to go on? And really, you were there when things changed?" The answer to that question is not up to us. It belongs to the rest of the world now. The only thing that this team can contribute is to keep reporting, and that's exactly what we intend to do. Thank you. We'd now like to hand things off to Emily Steele and Michael Schmidt, who began this reporting. Here is their editor, Bill Brink.
When Emily and Mike were assigned in August of 2016 to look into Bill O'Reilly, they didn't know each other. They hadn't worked together. They lived in different cities and they covered different subjects. Mike covered the Washington world of cutthroat scheming and naked ambition. Emily covered the media. Turned out to be a pretty good pairing. They were thrown together on the mission impossible, really, to break down the wall of silence, secrets, and settlements that for 2 decades had protected O'Reilly and his pattern of sexual misconduct at Fox News. It would be hard to overstate how difficult this was. There was no trailblazing harassment reporting for them to follow, at least not recently. There were no anonymous tips, no trove of documents, no whistleblowers. Instead, there were punitive non-disclosure agreements and a legacy of fear and retribution that made almost everyone unwilling to talk. The work was painstaking, laborious, and often frustrating. But Mike and Emily quickly formed a unique collaborative partnership, one based on trust and respect. Emily told me that over the course of 7.5 months of reporting, leading up to the first O'Reilly story, they didn't have one fight or even one disagreement. I didn't fact check that with Mike. Pretty close? Okay. They'd spend hours in a small conference room looking for leads. At times I thought I should push a tray of food through a slot in the door. Emily stood in the rain and knocked on doors to try to talk to sources. She got screamed at by lawyers, and she listened for hours on the phone. And this is the most important part. To women who just needed a sympathetic ear and to have their stories told. Mike stared down O'Reilly's lawyers and his crisis consultant and toggled between O'Reilly and the biggest running story in Washington, Trump and Russia. We had some moments of levity. We concocted code names for some of the sources. One of them was The Voice, because we called this person The Voice because this person always made fun of Emily's voice, which some people think is high-pitched. I haven't noticed that, but God help the person who misjudges her based on that voice. Mike told me Emily's the most badass reporter I've ever worked with, and I work in Washington. Shortly before the second O'Reilly story, Emily drew a timeline, a Fox News timeline in green marker on the conference room wall. It had arrows and notes pointing everywhere. It looked like a scene out of Homeland. It was actually a little scary. I have a photo on my phone of her sitting in front of that wall 2 days before the story ran, slapping her hand against her forehead. If you wrote a caption for that photo, it would read, "God, this is hard." It sure was. We often say of accomplished professionals that they make it look easy. I'm not here to say that. These two extraordinary reporters did it the hard way. They broke down the door, and they got their story. Emily, Mike, congratulations for a truly remarkable piece of reporting. And Emily, thanks for the apple.
On April 1st last year, Mike and I published our investigation exposing how Bill O'Reilly and 21st Century Fox had paid millions to settle sexual harassment allegations against him. The story was a culmination of 8 grueling months of reporting, convincing sources to disclose the details of ironclad confidentiality agreements. Mr. O'Reilly's lawyer told the Times that we were creating a story where none existed. And the previous year, Mr. O'Reilly had told me that if I did anything that he had found untoward, that he would come after me with everything he had. About 2 weeks after our story ran, the Murdochs fired the king of cable news. And a whirlwind year later, after extraordinary reporting by so many fearless Times reporters, from Investigations to The Daily to The Upshot to BizDay, it's not an understatement to say that the world has changed and that journalism really matters. Women found the courage to share their stories, and the world listened. I'm so humbled by this extraordinary honor and overwhelmed by gratitude. Thank you to New York Times subscribers and the Sulzberger family for your continued commitment to supporting journalism's loftiest ideals, holding the powerful to account, and giving a voice to those who have been silenced. Thank you to Dean and Matt and Bill for remembering the story of Andrea Macris, that young woman who had sued Bill O'Reilly in 2004, and deciding Mike and me to re-report her case. When we found a much bigger story, you encouraged us to follow the money, creating a solid foundation of reporting upon which women could tell their stories and be believed. You recognized the power of this story. Mike, you're the most tenacious and creative reporter that I know. Thank you for your persistence in figuring out how we can move beyond those rumors that we had scribbled on a whiteboard into a solid story that we could get into the paper. It's been such an honor to work with you. Thank you to my parents who are here. They're right down there. For encouraging me to dream big, supporting me in pursuing those dreams, telling me when I went to college that I needed to learn how to cop an attitude, but also reminding me to be kind. To my fiancé, Dan, who's also here, over these past 20 months, you've listened to me interview sources in my sleep. You've taken me to listen to jazz, see art, and play pool when I was completely overwhelmed and heartsick by listening to stories of harassment and abuse. Your encouragement and never-ending support kept me going. I love you. And most importantly, my deepest thanks to the sources who picked up the phone when we called, who opened the door when we knocked, and decided to go on the record after I showed up at a Pilates class. Thank you for trusting us with your stories. Thank you for sharing experiences and documents and nuggets of information that allowed us to follow the facts and report a story that became bigger than any one of us. I'm astounded by your bravery. This award is for you.
There are a lot of reasons why this powerful reporting was unleashed. And as someone that got to be a part of it, I was able to see from the front row who were those folks that really pushed this along. The first one is Emily. When we started on this, it was really, really tough. We had no idea what we were doing. And nothing could shake her. No obstacle. When Fox had tracked her travel, it didn't bother her. It was that spirit that drove us through this enormously difficult time to where we ended up. The second person is Dean. I'm a firm believer that editors rarely have good ideas. But this was Dean's idea. In August of 2016, Dean said, we have to go back and look at the case of Andrea Macris, who had settled with Bill O'Reilly. This thing had happened many years ago. It had stayed in his mind, and he knew something was not right about it, and there was more to go. Without that, we never would have started. I want to thank Bill Brink, our coach throughout all of this. His steady hand kept us going, never pushing too hard, just staying with us, cleaning up our copy, keeping us focused. Without that coach, we wouldn't have been there. I want to thank Matt Purdy, who I get to see on a day-to-day basis drive the New York Times from New York with his foot on the brake. It's true. It's true. So many times in this reporting and in our Russia reporting, he has calmed us and saved us. Matt did something remarkable when we were almost done with the story. We had our final meeting to discuss the piece, and we're getting ready to go. And Matt said, you guys got it. And he said, now let's ratchet it back 5%. And I was furious, because it meant that a lot of reporting that we had was going to go on the cutting room floor. But he was right. We did have it. And to make ourselves bulletproof, we needed to do that. It's an incredibly great lesson. I want to thank David McCraw, who's been with me since the beginning when I started getting into trouble as a sports reporter, calming me when the government sent me nasty letters and telling me not to worry because I wasn't going to ever get anything. You solve so many problems around here that folks don't see, and we're very grateful for that. 13 years ago, I walked into 229 West 43rd Street to interview to be a clerk, and I began a love affair with this place unlike anything else. A lot of people ask me these days whether it must be so miserable. Am I so tired? Am I so stressed? I tell them that I have never been luckier. Luckier to work for the family that runs this place, for the editors, and for them. This is an incredible time, and there is nowhere where I would rather be, and I know how lucky I am. I'm here for a lot of reasons. I'm here because Jay Schreiber, a crazy editor in sports, thought it was a good idea to send me to Yankee Stadium to chase George Steinbrenner around. Because of Tom Jolly, Jason Stallman, and Joe Section, who ushered me through sports. To Susan Shira, who sent me to Iraq. And to someone whose spirit's here today but isn't. When I was in Iraq, Janet Elder called me. She said that they wanted me to go to Washington. And I said, Sifton and I had cooked up this great scheme where I was going to go to San Francisco. And she said, She called me back a week later and said, you're going to Washington. Without her, I wouldn't have ended up there, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. To Elizabeth Buemiller, Bill Hamilton, Amy Fiskus, and Rebecca Corbin in Washington, who guide us every day through these incredible times, thank you so much. And especially to Elizabeth, who I hope everyone recognizes leads us every single day in the midst of incredible competition, a White House that comes after us, and just with such ease. We are so grateful to have her. To my big brothers in the Bureau, Matt Apuzzo, Adam Goldman, and Matt Rosenberg. To Maggie Haberman, who is truly the backbone of this newspaper in so many more ways than even you could think. to Mark Mazzetti, my dear friend, who ran our Russia coverage, it was a long year. It was a long year, and he was so great. And lastly, to my parents and my sister and my soon-to-be brother-in-law, Tim, in my bar mitzvah speech, I said that my parents and my sister are my heroes. And if this is the sequel to that speech, I'm happy to say it couldn't be any more true today. Thank you.
For Times subscribers only, we will be showing Mike's bar mitzvah speech at 5:30 today. The Trump story has been the most difficult, challenging, and demanding story any of us have ever seen. It has put us in the position of sparring in public with the president, of standing up for our principles as never before, and that would not have been possible, as Mike said, without the great Elizabeth B. Miller.
Thank you, Dean. It's true that we could not have done this without you. That's an absolute fact. Okay, the Russia team. I'm really proud to announce these names. Just come on up the stairs. Mike Schmidt, come on back. Maggie Haberman, hold your applause. Matt Apuzzo, Adam Goldman, Joe Becker, Matt Rosenberg, Sharon Lafreniere, Scott Shane, Eric Lischblau. Okay. And now the editors. Mark Mazzetti, who was also a reporter, Bill Hamilton, Amy Fiskus, and Paul Fischletter. What an extraordinary accomplishment. What a year you've had. Mark, my job here is to come in under 2 minutes. We're planning on overperforming in Washington to do that. And also, but my job is to introduce Mark Mazzetti. So Mark is going to talk about the Russia investigation. But before I get to Mark, I just want to give a shout out to the Washington Bureau. I hope you're all listening and watching. I know what it's like to be in Washington watching the superstars get Pulitzers in New York. Well, you're down there just trying to get out the report. So yes, these guys are, and women are, superstars. But so are you, because you helped make all this happen. This has been an unbelievable year in the Washington Bureau. We are spending close to 24 hours a day operating on this story. It's the most demanding story of our lifetime. So thank you to the White House team, the National Security team, the econ team, the congressional team, the domestic policy reporters, the political reporters, the feature writers, the clerks, and to the editors. To the day crew, the night crew, the early morning tweet crew, the weekend crew, which are all part of our really strong desk that makes this bureau hum. And now, I have the great pleasure of introducing Mark Mazzetti. Mark? A little over a year ago, we bludgeoned Mark into leaving reporting and becoming Washington Investigations editor. There was a few dinners with Matt and Dean. So he promised us a 1-year deployment, nothing more, and he has held firm. He's now back to the high calling of reporting and is, of course, turning out his usual scoops. But what a year as an editor he had. There's the Pulitzer, of course. but he also has the great admiration of his colleagues as a brilliant, aggressive, tough-minded, but very humane editor and leader. At a time when we're under attack, and it's more important than ever to get our facts straight and to be rigorous, Mark has set the highest standard. And he just makes us all laugh.
Thank you, Elizabeth, from all the members of Mike Schmidt's second Pulitzer family. He comes and visits us every other weekend. First off, our team wants to offer hearty congratulations to our competitors and sometimes friends at the Washington Post who share this award with us. The competition between the Times and the Post on this story has been exhausting for all of us, but in the end, great for journalism. On January 19th of last year, we wrote a story about an ongoing federal investigation into the campaign of the person who about 18 hours later was about to take the oath of office to become president. We didn't know then, and we don't know now, where this story will end. But it's been an honor to cover it with the people standing here. It's been a true team effort, cutting across different sections of the paper, involving constant collaboration and a recognition that if we hoard information, we get beat. It was an inspiration to wake up each morning and see 20 signal messages with all of the information the group had unearthed since the previous night. The fatigue and the frustration recedes into memory when you focus on some of the great moments. Like when Schmidt says, "So apparently Comey wrote these memos." Or sitting with Joe Becker in Paul's office, and Joe said, "I'm hearing about this really interesting meeting at Trump Tower." The team effort came in the face of big challenges. A secretive White House that tries to dismiss everything we've written as fake news, and looming threats to throw sources in jail. Thank you, Arthur, AG, Dean, Joe, Matt Purdy, for ensuring that we were given the time and the resources to do the kind of the reporting the New York Times needs to do in this current era. We owe a huge, huge debt of gratitude to our families, many of whom are here today, some who are actually on the staircase, I think, for all the burdens they've endured while we were consumed by this story. And finally, I'd like to say, while a few of us are being recognized up here today, the really momentous work is being done every day by every member of the Washington Bureau. You are the greatest collection of journalists someone could ever hope to work with, led by an amazing bureau chief. And the grace and professionalism you have shown in the current era, often with a camera in your face, is nothing short of extraordinary. To our colleagues in the Bureau, a year and a half ago, you saw the storm coming and you ran right into it. Thanks very much.
So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues in opinion, and James will introduce the cartooning winners.
I want to congratulate the reporters who led the way for all of us, but listening to those talks makes me want to congratulate really everybody in the room. It is such a powerful reminder of what a privilege it is to get to do this work at this place during this time. I want to begin by congratulating Katie Kingsbury on the power of her series on the connection between gun violence and domestic abuse. She and the team she led She probably set a land speed record, by the way, for becoming a Pulitzer finalist within 3 months of walking in the doors of the New York Times. She and the team she led, Stuart Thompson, Jasiah Ma, Mateen McCullough, set a new standard for us for excellence in using text, video, and graphics to conduct an editorial crusade. So now, speaking in part of visual journalism, to turn to the extraordinary achievement of Jake Halpern and Michael Sloan. Jake and Michael brought all the elements of great opinion journalism together in their comic strip, Welcome to the New World. Deep, empathetic reporting, strong point of view, and a compelling and original form of argument. So original and so compelling that they've expanded everyone's understanding of the category of editorial cartooning. This is the first time that the Times has won a Pulitzer in this category, but it's also the first time that a nonfiction cartoon strip has ever been recognized for the Pulitzer. Jake and Michael also had a very strong team standing behind them. Jim Dow, our great op-ed editor, Rachel Dry, the editor of the Sunday Review, who also, by the way, edited both the Selma Hayek and Lupita Nyong'o pieces, Sandy Harvin, Carmel McCoubre, Singda Corla, Taylor Adams, and again, Jasiah Ma brought the strip to life on the web. But there's one editor whom, in particular, whom our readers and all of us owe our admiration and gratitude for the success of this project. Bruce Headlam is one editor who has a lot of good ideas, and this was one of them. Bruce saw the plight of the Syrian refugees in Donald Trump's America, and he imagined a powerful way to bring that story home to our readers that would stand apart from what everyone else was doing. He recruited Jake and Michael. Bruce left our ranks a few months ago to pursue a new challenge, and now, Bruce, I just want to say what an honor it is and what a happy thing it is to welcome you back to celebrate this achievement on top of all your other contributions to the New York Times.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's wonderful to be back in the newsroom. I like what you guys are doing here. I can't wait for you to get air conditioning. It'll be even nicer. I promise to keep this brief. Glenn wants to keep us going, and if I'm here 45 more minutes, I think under union rules, they have to rehire me, and I don't think anybody wants that to happen. A couple names I would like to add to what James said. First, Lauren Ricci, who looked after the contracts for Michael and Jake, and who made sure that our translators got paid and all that sort of thing. Mona Nagur, an old friend from video, who was a great sounding board when we started the project. Our copy editors, Sandy Harvin and Carmel, they make really everything better, up in opinion. Sandy was actually the first copy editor I ever worked with when I came here 19 years ago. And she was the last copy editor I worked with on this strip, but that's not sad because she's also the first reader on my wife's next novel, so we get to keep up. On a personal note, the people who found a place for me up in opinion, Trish Hall. Trish found me one day wandering the halls asking the question probably a lot of us ask at some point, which is, if the New York Times is the greatest media organization in the world, why do we have the worst Wi-Fi in all of New York City? So she said, up on 13, the air is clean, the Wi-Fi is slightly better, and Andy Rosenthal welcomed me, and the person who really made it happen was Janet Elder. I actually first person I told about the idea for the comic strip was Janet, and it just doesn't seem right that she's not here with us today. And I would like to thank James. If you are an editor now, you're in the risk business. Risks don't always pay off. and certainly you take it on the nose if things don't go perfectly, sometimes even if they do. And I hope that this adds to the long list of things that he's done that have been huge successes. And I really appreciate his support for this. As he said, this was just an idea that came up at a meeting between James and I. As Mike Schmidt said, editors have lots of ideas. Some are good, most are half-baked, some are idiotic. In 19 years here, I had the pleasure of having many reporters tell me that to my face, this is the old days. It's probably done on Slack now. There's a channel that says my editor's a moron. It's only as good as the people you hire, and I got very lucky with Jake and Michael. I had talked to a lot of cartoonists and publishing houses, and it was Honor Jones, another editor, who suggested Jake, who'd done great work that I did remember in The New Yorker on refugees. Turns out he was also a novelist and just had the great sensibility and the great narrative drive to push this. He called me on November 9th and said I spent this whole day with these two brothers. It took all day for them to land, to get processed, and then when I looked at my phone at 10 o'clock at night when it was all done, I realized that Donald Trump had been elected president. He said, "What do you think?" And I think, well, I think that's a good start, and we'll go from there. His second great instinct was Michael Sloan. Michael, whose work I didn't know, he's done a lot of work for the Times. He was mainly an illustrator, not a comic artist, but he had a style I thought that would just work beautifully in print and online, and just together they created something that I think had an enormous amount of empathy. If you can imagine trying to write and draw about people of a different race from a different culture speaking a different language, and rendering it as a cartoon. It was never cartoonish. It was always very sophisticated, and I think their work was just brilliant. Jake actually is out of the country, so he asked me just to read a very brief note, which if I have my glasses, I will read. Jake writes, "I never thought I would be standing here, which is why I'm not actually standing here. And am instead on a long-planned trip to Spain with my wife and kids. For me, this story was always about my relationship with the family, two brothers, Jamil and Amar, and their wives and kids. I met them a few hours after they arrived in the U.S. I knew from the outset if this project was going to succeed, I'd need to get close with them. A few days later, when I visited Jamil, he welcomed me into his house with such warmth, he made me tea, and then he told me the story about how Assad's men had tortured him. I wanted to retell that story in the first installment. Normally, as a journalist, I'd never share a draft of a story with the subject. But this was different. I needed to make sure that it was right. So one day, I presented Jamil with a copy of Michael's sketch. He didn't have much furniture, so the whole family, including the kids, all sat down on the floor and gathered around the sketch. At last, Jamil said, "Everything is perfect, except for the car that took me to the airport. It was a 2011 Mitsubishi Lancer." "We can fix that," I said. For the next year, I followed both families, observing Ramadan, driving lessons, family parties, lunches at the kids' cafeteria. I witnessed joyous occasions, like when Ragnita, Amar's wife, had our first art opening. I was there for the heartbreaking day when the Trump administration issued its travel ban. I got very close with these people. As a journalist, this was messy and complicated. The families didn't agree with all my editorial choices, and sometimes they told me so. But on the whole, it worked. We told this great story together. They trusted me, and that trust was both a burden and a great honor. At first glance, this project doesn't look like serious journalism. It looks like, well, a comic. I realize that from the perspective of the Times, that was a risk. My hope is that this Pulitzer will encourage the Times to take more risks, like this one, to bet on other freelancers like us, who may have other strange and outlandish ideas about how good stories should be told. That's from Jake. What Jake is too modest to say is that the story actually isn't over. The strips ended in September. They continue to work with the family. They have sold a graphic novel to Metropolitan Books, which published Waltz with Bashir and The Arab of the Future and other great books. And they're doing a young adult version as well. And it's also being turned into a television series by David Lucerne Abir, who himself is a Pulitzer Prize winner for Rabbit Hole, the play, in 2008. So they continue to work on this. Despite all that success, when we first started it, the numbers were actually quite bad inside the Times. In fact, as it turns out, the Times was the only place it didn't seem to be a success, at least online. And it was very frustrating when we were first doing it. We weren't getting, Facebook Lives. Nobody was retweeting us. We weren't getting any of the kind of big, sexy stuff that some stories and some journalists here seem to attract. My wife, who's a reporter here for 8 years, had a name for those journalists. She called them senior male writers. She applied to be a senior male writer, but never heard back. But in fact, as it turned out, they did have a large and powerful audience, mainly through print, which is hard to measure. So I hope for all the people out there who aren't up here, but are doing the great work I now get to read in the New York Times every day because I don't work at the New York Times, please take heart, because I'm sure there is a devoted and important audience for your journalism as well. And now with that, I'm going to introduce Michael Sloan. Thank you.
I want to echo Jake's remarks in appreciation of the extraordinary family that this is the subject of our comic. I also want to make it very clear that Bruce Headlam, this was your idea, and it wouldn't have happened without you. Thanks also to my wife and children, whose love makes everything possible. Jake, I wish you were here to share this moment with me. Welcome to the New World expresses certain values or opinions that are very important to me. They are understanding, compassion, and tolerance. I feel that this prize that Jake and I are receiving is a resounding vote in support of those values. And there's never enough understanding, compassion, and tolerance in the world, especially in these days. Thank you, Rachel Dry, Jim Dow, Bruce. Welcome to the New World would never have happened and been so successful without your support. Thanks to the designers and art directors who made our comic look so good week after week. You rock. There's one other person I'd like to thank. Some of you may know him, some of you might have heard of him. Steve Heller, the former art director at the Times Book Review, who gave me my first break as an illustrator back in 1989. The Times has always felt like home to me. My first published illustration assignment appeared on the Times op-ed page. Michael Valenti was the art director at that time. Since then, I've completed more than 100 assignments for the Times, more than for any other publication. Thank you, Steve Heller. Thank you, the New York Times, for giving me a break all those years ago when I was a young, inexperienced kid who had just arrived in New York with a backpack, a guitar, a portfolio of artwork, and some hopes and dreams. And thank you for continuing to support young illustrators, because you never know what wonderful things can happen when you do.
So I just have 2 paragraphs, promise. I don't want this to end without thanking Mark Thompson and Meredith Levian and the other members of what we used to call the business side for their support. Glenn Kramen and Adam Kepler, who do most of the work in pulling the prizes together. Bernie Espina delayed her retirement so she could be here for the Pulitzers. Richard Pinsky, Janet Elder's husband, is here with us. I want to point out that with Sam Dolnick, AG, David Perpich, and Michael Greenspan at the helm, this place is in good hands for many years to come. And finally, I want to say I think I've done this at 2 newspapers for a lot of years, and I'm not sure I've seen one more perfect than this. Thank you.